There is a phrase every narcissist uses when you stop talking, and seemingly innocent, almost nostalgic phrase that arrives exactly when you are starting to breathe in peace. And if you don't recognize this trap, you will be pulled back into the cycle of control you fought so hard to break free from. Silence is the narcissist's kryptonite. While you internally celebrate the freedom of no contact, they are being corroded from within by the absence of their emotional supply. They cannot stand not knowing if they still have power over you. They cannot accept that you can exist without thinking about them. And it is precisely at that moment that they cast the most subtle bait of all. Carl Jung, the pioneer who unmasked the deepest layers of the human psyche, warned us about the mechanisms of shadow projection. He understood that the manipulator cannot admit their own desperate need for control, so they disguise this hunger as care, as concern, as genuine longing. But behind the mask of nostalgia, there is only the hungry void trying to feed itself once more. The message arrives when you least expect it. It could be after weeks, months, or even years of silence. A notification that makes your heart race before you even read the content. And when you open it, there it is. The phrase designed to seem harmless, but strategically constructed to reopen the channel you worked so hard to close. The narcissist knows they cannot return with aggression or drama. They have learned that these tactics no longer work with you, so they return disguised as melancholy, as simplicity, as humanity. They return pretending to be just someone who remembered you fondly. But the truth is, they never stopped calculating the right moment for this return. This is not a message from someone who has moved past what you went through. It is not communication from someone who has found peace or growth. It is the desperate manifestation of someone who has discovered they cannot exist without the confirmation that they can still affect you. It is the vampire of another's shadow attempting one more bite. The phrase comes loaded with intentional ambiguity. It is vague enough not to seem invasive, but specific enough to provoke an emotional reaction. It is the perfect hook. It seems safe to touch, but it is designed to snag you the moment you make contact. What Jung discovered about emotional manipulation in relationships completely changes how we interpret these delayed messages. He showed us that behind every seemingly affectionate gesture from the narcissist lies a primary need for domination. And this phrase, this message that arrives in silence, is the last card in the manipulative deck. You have received this message before. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That text that arrived when you were finally starting to feel free. That phrase that made you question if perhaps, just perhaps, they really had changed. That bait that almost made you respond. But what happens when you recognize this tactic for what it truly is? What changes when you understand that this isn't nostalgia, but a need for control disguised as longing? Pause for a moment and be brutally honest with yourself. How many times have you received a seemingly innocent message from someone who hurt you and felt that tightness in your chest? How many times have you looked at your phone and seen their name appear after weeks or months of silence, and your first reaction was a mix of panic and curiosity? You remember the feeling, your heart racing before you even open the message, your hands slightly trembling as you swipe your finger across the screen. And then you read, "I was thinking of you," or "I saw something that reminded me of you," or simply, "How are you?" 3 or 4 words that can destabilize weeks of inner progress. And what happens in your mind at that moment? You start to question everything. Has he really changed? Has he finally understood what he did wrong? Is this an opportunity to have the conversation you always wanted to have? Your rational mind screams it's a trap, but something inside you whispers that maybe this time it's different. While you hesitate between responding or ignoring, he has already gotten what he wanted. You are thinking about him again. You are questioning yourself again. You are, even if only for a few minutes, back in the emotional place where he has power over your reactions. The bait worked, even if you haven't bitten. Your true self, your sovereign essence, recognizes the danger immediately. It's that inner voice that warns you, don't respond. You know how this ends. But the part of you that was conditioned by manipulation, the part that still carries the hope that he might be different, that part wants to believe the message. Have you responded to one of these messages before? Have you fallen into this trap of thinking that an affectionate phrase meant genuine change? And what happened next? Did he return to the previous pattern in a matter of days or weeks? Did you find yourself again caught in the cycle of empty promises and predictable disappointments? The narcissist banks on your ability to see the good in people. He knows you are someone who believes in second chances, in growth, in redemption. And he uses precisely this most beautiful quality of yours against you. He transforms your empathy into vulnerability, your hope into a gateway. While you struggle between responding or not, he is calculating. If you respond with anger, he knows he still provokes intense reactions in you. If you respond with coldness, he knows he is still occupying your mental space. If you respond with affection, he knows he can attempt a reconciliation. Any response is a victory for him. But what if you simply don't respond? What if you recognize that this message isn't about you, but about his desperate need to confirm that he still has influence over your emotional life? What if you understand that silence, in this case, isn't coldness, but protection? Can you feel the difference between a person who has truly grown and one who is just testing the waters? A person who has genuinely changed doesn't come back with ambiguous phrases. They come back with clear accountability, with specific acknowledgement of mistakes, with concrete actions, not with emotional bait. The mirror is before you now. Do you recognize this pattern in your own history? Can you see how this simple tactic manages to destabilize months of healing? It's because you were targeted by this specific manipulation, and today you will understand not only how it works, but how to become immune to it. The root of this manipulation lies in what Jung called shadow projection. The narcissist cannot face their own desperate need for validation, so they project this hunger as if it were genuine care for you. They transform their emotional dependence into apparent nostalgia. The narcissist's inner void functions like a psychic black hole. They cannot exist without sucking emotional energy from other people. When you cut contact, you literally cut off the supply that feeds their fragile ego. And this is unbearable for someone whose entire identity depends on controlling others. The message they send is not about you. It's about the inner panic they feel at losing control over one of their sources of validation. But they cannot admit this, not even to themselves. So they disguise this desperate need as affection, as concern, as genuine longing. Jung taught us that the manipulator uses the persona, the social mask, to hide the real impulses of the shadow. In this case, the persona is that of someone sensitive and nostalgic. The shadow is that of someone thirsty for control and incapable of accepting rejection. The seemingly affectionate phrase is the mask that hides the vampiric hunger for attention. The timing of the message is never accidental. The narcissist possesses a sharp manipulative intuition. They wait for the moment when you are feeling strong, when you have started to rebuild your life without them. It is precisely at this moment of the vulnerability of victory that they attack. When you are congratulating yourself on your newfound freedom, they appear to remind you that perhaps you are not so free after all. The ambiguity of the message is intentional. It needs to be vague enough not to seem invasive or manipulative, but specific enough to awaken an emotional response. It's like a psychological test disguised as affection. They don't want to know how you are. They want to know if they can still affect you. What Jung discovered is that this tactic reveals more about the manipulator than about the victim. It is confirmation that they haven't grown, haven't changed, haven't moved on. If they had truly evolved as a person, they would respect your silence. They would understand that you have the right to exist without their presence in your life. But the narcissist cannot conceive a reality where you are genuinely happy without them. In their distorted mind, you must be suffering from their absence. You must be waiting for a sign that they still care. The message is the projection of this narcissistic fantasy onto your reality. The truth is that this seemingly innocent phrase is one of the most sophisticated control mechanisms in the narcissistic arsenal. It does not demand direct confrontation. It does not generate immediate drama, but it can destabilize months of progress in a matter of seconds. It is manipulation disguised as delicacy, control dressed up as longing. Understanding this dynamic is the first step to definitively freeing yourself from it, because when you recognize the phrase for what it truly is, you lose the ability to be affected by it. The classic phrase every narcissist uses is, "I was thinking of you." Simple, direct, seemingly harmless. But behind these 4 words lies a meticulously calculated control mechanism. He wasn't thinking of you. He was obsessed with the absence of the control he exerted over you. When he says, "I was thinking of you," the real translation is, "I was thinking about how to regain the power I lost when you decided to pull away." It is the disguised confession that he cannot accept that you can exist and thrive without his presence in your life. The second variation is equally insidious. I saw something that reminded me of you. A song, a place, a photo, a movie. There is always something external that supposedly triggered the memory. But the truth is he doesn't need external triggers to think about you, because you never left his mind. What he saw was just a socially acceptable excuse to break the silence. This phrase reveals something fundamental about narcissistic psychology, the incapacity to take responsibility for one's own feelings. He cannot say, "I miss you," because that would be admitting emotional dependence. So he places the responsibility of the memory on something external, as if destiny were conspiring to reconnect you. The third form is the most treacherous of all. How are you? The question that seems like genuine interest in your well-being, but which is actually a psychological probe to assess your current emotional state. He doesn't want to know how you are. He wants to know if you are vulnerable enough to respond. Jung warned us about this specific form of manipulation because it exploits our natural need for human connection. When someone asks how we are, our first reaction is to respond. It's a basic social reflex. The narcissist banks precisely on this automatism to reopen the channel of communication. Notice that none of these phrases contain an apology, an acknowledgement of mistakes, or a specific promise of change. They are carefully neutral, designed not to awaken your immediate defense. They are emotional bait disguised as social courtesy. The most dramatic variation is, "I miss you." Here, the narcissist feigns vulnerability to awaken your compassion. He knows you have an empathetic heart, and that an apparent confession of feeling can soften your defenses. But he doesn't miss you as a person. He misses what you represented to his ego. Each of these phrases has one element in common. They put you in the position of responding. They transform you into the passive recipient of his initiative. Even if you respond with coldness or anger, he still got what he wanted. To confirm that he still has the power to provoke an emotional reaction in you. What makes these phrases particularly dangerous is precisely their apparent innocence. They don't sound like obvious manipulation. They could come from anyone genuinely interested in reconnecting. It is this apparent normalcy that makes you let your guard down. But there is a fundamental difference between a person who has grown and is trying to reconnect, and a narcissist testing your defenses. The person who has truly changed comes back with accountability, with specific acknowledgement of mistakes made, with concrete actions to demonstrate change. The narcissist comes back with ambiguous phrases that place the emotional responsibility on you. The next time you receive one of these messages, pause before responding. Ask yourself, is this person taking responsibility for what happened between us? Or are they simply testing if they can still affect me? The real objective behind the phrase is not genuine reconnection. It is confirmation of power. The narcissist needs to know if they can still provoke an emotional reaction in you. Any response, even anger or coldness, is a victory for them, because it means they still occupy emotional space in your life. If you respond with affection, he interprets it as an open door to resume the cycle of control. If you respond with anger, he confirms that he can still destabilize your emotional balance. If you respond with forced indifference, he perceives the effort you are making not to show affection, which is also a victory. The only response the narcissist doesn't know how to interpret is absolute silence, because silence gives no clues about your emotional state. It doesn't confirm power. It doesn't open doors. It doesn't feed the wounded ego. It is the complete denial of the validation he desperately seeks. Jung understood that this need for confirmation of power is a manifestation of the narcissistic shadow. The narcissist projects their own fears of abandonment and irrelevance onto the victim's silence. They cannot conceive that you can be genuinely at peace without them. In their distorted mind, your silence must mean repressed pain, not freedom gained. The phrase functions as a reality test for the narcissist. He is testing if the persona of a changed person that he has constructed internally can be effective in regaining access to you. If you respond, he confirms that the mask worked. If you don't respond, he will probably try a different approach in a few weeks or months. The timing of the message reveals even more about the manipulative intention. It never arrives when you are visibly suffering or vulnerable. It arrives exactly when you have started to show signs that you are thriving without him. It's when you post a happy photo, when you achieve something important, when you seem genuinely well that the message appears. This is no coincidence. It's strategy. The narcissist monitors your life from a distance and attacks the moment your independent happiness threatens his internal narrative, that you need him to be complete. Your happiness without him is unbearable for the narcissistic ego. The intentional ambiguity of the phrase serves to confuse your intuition. If the message were clearly manipulative, you would reject it immediately. But because it sounds like something a genuinely caring person might send, it creates enough doubt for you to consider responding. This doubt is exactly what the narcissist is seeking to create. He doesn't want you to respond out of certainty. He wants you to respond out of hesitation. Because a hesitant response confirms that he still has psychological power over you, even from a distance. What Jung taught us is that recognizing this dynamic is liberating. When you understand that the seemingly affectionate phrase is actually a test of control, you lose the ability to be emotionally affected by it. You see the manipulation for what it is, desperation disguised as longing. True freedom is not being able to respond with coldness. It is no longer feeling the compulsion to respond. It is looking at the message and feeling nothing but a quiet confirmation that you made the right choice by walking away. Now that you recognize the trap, how do you protect yourself from it? The first tool is what Jung would call active imagination applied to psychic protection. When the message arrives, and it probably will, visualize it as what it truly is, not a bridge, but a hook. Imagine the narcissist on the other side of the screen, not as someone who has grown or changed, but as someone desperate to confirm that they still have power over you. Visualize their vampiric need being projected through the seemingly affectionate words. When you see the hunger behind the mask, the illusion crumbles. Practice what we will call dialogue with the stolen essence. Get a journal and write honestly about what you feel when you receive this type of message. Don't judge the feelings. Just acknowledge them. Do you feel curiosity, longing, anger, hope? All these reactions are valid, but they need to be made conscious. Now write a letter you will never send. A letter where you say everything you would feel like responding to him. Unload all the emotion the message awakened. This letter is not for him. It is for you. It is to empty the emotional container that the message filled. After writing, burn the letter or symbolically destroy it. The second tool is what we can call the real motivation test. Before considering any response, ask yourself these questions. If he had truly changed, what would his approach be like? A person who has grown takes specific responsibility for mistakes, acknowledges the impact of past actions, offers concrete actions, not ambiguous words. Compare the message you received with what a genuinely responsible approach would be. The difference will be stark. A person who has truly changed doesn't come back with, "I was thinking of you." They come back with, "I recognize that I hurt you in specific ways and would like to take responsibility for that, if you are open to listening." Practice the reverse mirror exercise. Instead of asking yourself what the message means to you, ask yourself what it reveals about him. What did your silence represent to his ego? What kind of inner panic led a person to break months of silence with such a calculatedly vague phrase? When you reverse the perspective, you move from the position of a passive recipient to an analytical observer. You stop being a target of manipulation and become a student of manipulative behavior. This shift in perspective is profoundly liberating. The third tool is the practice of sovereign silence. Not silence as punishment or as a way to show coldness, but silence as an expression of your inner freedom. The silence that says, "I no longer need to prove anything to you. I no longer need to explain anything to you. I exist completely independent of your approval or disapproval." Create a protection ritual for when these messages arrive. It could be taking a bath and visualizing the manipulative energy being washed away. It could be going for a walk and letting the movement of your body dissolve any tension the message created. It could be calling a friend who reminds you of who you are when you are not being manipulated. Real freedom is not being able to respond with indifference. It is no longer feeling the compulsion to respond. It is looking at the message and feeling only a quiet confirmation that you made the right choice by protecting yourself from this dynamic. Remember, you don't owe explanations to someone who hurt you. You don't owe second chances to someone who didn't take responsibility for the first. Your silence is not cruelty. It is self-preservation. You now possess something few have, the ability to recognize the most subtle manipulation in the narcissistic arsenal. You can no longer unsee the pattern. You can no longer confuse hunger disguised as longing with genuine love. You can no longer interpret the control test as real concern. When the next message arrives, and it will, You will no longer feel that tightness in your chest. You will no longer spend hours analyzing the words in search of signs of genuine change. You will simply recognize the dynamic for what it is. The vampire of another's shadow attempting one more bite. You are now the guardian of your own journey. You are no longer the passive recipient of the emotional overtures of someone who hurt you. You are the conscious observer of the patterns that once captured you. You are the living expression of what Jung called individuation, the courage to exist as yourself, independent of external approval or manipulation. Your silence has ceased to be a reaction and has become a choice. It is no longer the silence of the person who doesn't know what to say, but the sovereign silence of someone who has understood that some people do not deserve access to their vital energy. It is the silence that protects, that preserves, that honors the sacred space you created by walking away. When you don't respond to the emotional bait, you break a cycle that may have lasted years. You demonstrate to yourself that you have finally broken the programming that made you believe you owed explanations to someone who hurt you. You confirm that your inner peace is worth more than curiosity about whether he has changed. The narcissist will continue to try other approaches. Perhaps he will change his tone. Perhaps he will use other people as intermediaries. Perhaps he will try to create situations to force an encounter. But now you possess the decoding key to all these tactics. You know that behind every move he makes there is only one question. Do I still have power over you? And your answer, expressed through absolute silence, is clear and definitive. No, this is not the temporary liberation of someone who is still fighting the temptation to respond. It is the permanent liberation of someone who has understood that the person who hurt you has no place in your present or your future. It is the sovereignty of someone who chose to become inaccessible to someone who once had total access to your vulnerability. You are no longer the victim waiting for the apology that will never genuinely come. You are the survivor who transformed pain into wisdom and vulnerability into strength. You are living proof that it is possible to completely free yourself from someone who tried to control you. Comment which of the mentioned phrases most alerted you to the pattern, like if you felt the courage to definitively break with the illusion of the nostalgic message. Subscribe to continue this journey of protection and individuation. The liberation is just beginning, but sovereign silence is already yours. The phrase they use to control you has lost all power over you. You have unmasked the last illusion. Unmask yourself.